Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Megan Beckley. I'm the Executive Director for the Berea Chamber of Commerce, and I'm very happy to have you all joining us here for our fourth session in the Inclusion by Instinct series. Wanted to start by just giving a quick shout out to our presenting sponsors, BW, Baldwin Wallace, and Cuyahoga Community College. We want to thank them very much for their support in helping us make this series free and open to all. And again, thank you to the folks that are with us live streaming today's presentation. We're also recording, so we can make sure that today's video goes into our resources library that'll be available for the next year. So we had a number of folks reach out saying they were really excited to hear from today's panelists, but weren't able to actually join us this morning. So we'll have that available for folks who want to watch it at their convenience after today's event. So with that, let's go ahead and get rolling. Today's session is surrounding the BIPOC community, and I'm very excited to have three wonderful speakers with us this morning. We have Cynthia Connolly, who is the Director of Programming at the City Club of Cleveland, Sue Hay, who is an attorney at law with Buckley King, and she also serves as the Executive Director for the Greater Cleveland Chinese Chamber of Commerce, and Dr. Rachel, who is our CEO at Synergy International Limited, Inc. So they are all amazing experience, and I think are going to bring some really interesting perspective to today's conversation. And instead of reading their bios, I figured it might be better for us to just go ahead and let them introduce themselves to you all. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Cynthia. Can you just say hello, tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive into today's questions?
Ani Dindisikwe Indigenous Hajijak and Dodam Wakanak Singodawa and Donjaba. I just introduced myself in my Anishinaabe language. I'm Cynthia Connolly. My Anishinaabe name is Blue Jay Woman. I'm a citizen of the Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians located in northern Michigan, and I'm from the Crane Clan. I am the Director of Programming here at the City Club of Cleveland, and I also serve multiple advocacy roles and board positions on a number of boards, including the Lake Erie Native American Council locally here in Northeast Ohio.
Great, thank you for being here. All right, Sue, let's go over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sue He. My Chinese name is He Su, that we put last name first and first name last. I originally from China. My hometown is Beijing. That both my parents and my in-laws are still living in China. I came here for law school and graduated and became a lawyer. And right now practice at Buckley King as a business immigration lawyer. In the meantime, I'm an executive director leading the Chinese chamber locally. That we have lots of American business sourcing resource from China, and also Chinese investors come to the Northeast Ohio to find their partners.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Rachel, let's go over to you.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Cynthia and Sue. Wonderful to be here with all of you, and of course with you too, Megan. My name is Dr. Rachel Yvonne Talton. My friends and colleagues and everybody except my mom calls me Dr. Rachel, and have been since I was about 6 years old, by the way. I am the CEO of Synergy International. We are an inclusion and executive coaching consultancy. We also do marketing research. I, like my colleagues, Cynthia and Sue, sit on a number of boards, both nationally and locally. I'm also on the corporate board of Tori Sudan, which is a Black-owned fashion company, amazing, incredible boots, right? Who doesn't love those? And purses. And I'm very, very excited to be here to talk about our cultural heritage, particularly Black people, BIPOC people, and other historically marginalized groups. So I'm very excited to be here today.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, so let's dive into it today. Have a lot of stuff I'd love to get through, so we'll see how far we get through on my list here. But with most of these sessions, the first thing that we like to start with is just kind of some basic introductory information around the language for the community. And I know obviously all three of you are representing different pieces of the BIPOC community, different cultural communities, so certainly you can all speak to your own personal perspective and experience. But I'd love to start with just kind of talking a little bit about the language in the BIPOC community. So even that acronym BIPOC itself, some folks might not be familiar with exactly what that means. Some of the other language that people aren't sure, things like Black versus African American, Native American versus First Nation, some of those different just pieces of language. So any insight that you have that you can share that might just help educate folks surrounding language would be great. So Cynthia, let's go ahead and start with you.
So I actually get this question a lot when I give presentations to libraries, schools, colleges, you name it. And it's always, what should I call you? Because I think a lot of folks are used to saying just Indian or Native American. And for the longest time, I kind of just said what I personally thought was the most appropriate, which I almost always go first, my tribal nation. There are 576 federally recognized tribes in the United States, and we're all separate, sovereign, very diverse, unique nations. And so I almost always say I'm Odawa. Or I'm Anishinaabe, which is a little bit larger group, which includes the Potawatomi and the Ojibwe as well. So always start with tribal nation first. And I want to also preface this too, that we actually have hard data for the first time on what our people like to call themselves. And it's a report survey done by this national Native nonprofit called Illuminative in partnership with the Native Organizers Alliance and the Center for Native American Youth, which is an Aspen Institute organization. And they surveyed over 6,400 Native Americans representing 401 tribes across all 50 states. And they asked actually this question. So we now actually have quantitative data about what people are, well, rather qualitative, if you want to parse it that way, about what we like to call ourselves. And the results were overwhelming and kind of reflected how I also personally felt. First, tribal nation. If you don't know the tribal nation, then you can, Native American is preferred, or next is simply just Native. Indigenous is trending up. We feel that's more inclusive of our Alaska Native brothers and sisters, our First Nations brothers and sisters to the north, as well as the indigenous communities south of Texas and in Hawaii as well. So it's more inclusive. Trending out is American Indian. Although that is still technically the legal term, you will see in a lot of documents, our United States Census, for example, so that's still the legal predominant term. Indian is out. Like, I don't know anyone in like a millennial and below that prefers to call themselves Indian unironically. So that is actually trending out. So that's kind of what the data is showing us now.
Thank you.
I love that. Thank you so much, Cynthia. My grandfather was part Cherokee. I think probably about at least 45% Cherokee, and he very much couldn't stand. And he died when he was 107 years old. Could not stand this idea that somehow Indigenous people were Indian, even back then. So thank you for that. My thought about it, Megan, is really just kind of from a larger perspective. I just put people first, right? So people, right? Call me a human being first. Put people first in whatever language you're using. I say avoid jargon whenever you can. Even BIPOC, right? If you don't explain what that is and really be clear that everyone understands what it is that you're saying, I would say just be clear in your language. Try to avoid language that talks about people being victims, right? So you may want to talk about historically marginalized groups, et cetera, but people with disabilities as opposed to the disabled, even historically resilient, trying to put people and elevate people as opposed to minimalizing or marginalizing them, and try to be inclusive. So for example, I like to be called Black. I believe that I am Black. I'm mixed with 5 races, but as an African American, I'm a Black woman. My mother, who had 18 brothers and sisters, who was born of this half Cherokee, half African human being, my grandfather, she wants to be called African American because they were just getting through Negro, right? They were happy to be African American. I'm more comfortable with Black because it's more inclusive, as Cynthia was talking about. So I like to be called Black. I mean, at the end of the day, my last piece of advice is, if you're unsure, ask. Right? If you're unsure with anyone, I mean, and there's 78 ways in which someone can express their sexuality and gender. 78 ways, right? So again, if you're unsure, ask. People are happy to tell you how they identify and what they'd like to be called.
Thank you for that. Sue, I'll go over to you.
I totally agree with both panelists, and I appreciate that Dr. Rachel shared how she liked to be called, because like for Chinese, we don't want to be called yellow because that represents that history. But for Chinese American, Asian Americans, those are okay for us. But I think most this difference for Chinese community is probably what call them is not the first priority. What you talk to them, like the language barrier is the first thing. Sometimes they don't even understand what you say, and they don't know what you call them. That's actually the basic. And when we, at least for me, I want to tell people that keep that in mind. When you feel the other person doesn't reply you or rude to you, it's not really that they don't reply or rude, it's that probably they don't understand. They speak different language, they feel comfortable to speak different language. And when they trying to show nice, they can smile. And if they want to show their kindness and keep that in mind, that the communication is more work. And we are all very friendly people. We don't think others bad first. So keep the diversity in the heart will show difference. Yeah.
If I add one quick thing too, the asking is so important. There's a lot of folks that will want to, may not know your tribal nation. And so the way you ask is you just ask, what's your tribal nation? I'm emphasizing the use of the word nation because a lot of our, we are separate sovereign nations, and putting an emphasis on that citizenship that really goes like a long way.
Thank you. All right, anything else we missed before we move into our next topic here?
You know, I would just like to say just quickly, because I think this is important to the discussion that we're having, is if you make a mistake, you know, I talked about 78 ways in which someone can express their sexuality. I want to be called Black. I'm very proud to be Black. Sue does not want to be called yellow, right? And that should be very clear to everyone. But if you make a mistake, and you called Cynthia one nation as opposed to another, apologize sincerely, authentically, and move on. People are happy to forgive someone for making a mistake, particularly if they know that you are have their best interest at heart and you're not trying to hurt them. But apologize and you know, for that mistake and move on. I feel like that's an important piece that we missed.
Yeah, great, thank you. All right, so let's move into kind of talking a little bit about some sort of just more pieces of statistics and information with regard to this community, the BIPOC community. So if you can talk a little bit about sort of what percentage of the population do they sort of represent here, and talk a little bit about their buying power. Most of the folks that are listening in today either own or work for small and medium-sized businesses, and really so trying to kind of help folks understand how much of the market we're actually talking about here with regard to the spending or the buying power here in the United States, and just, you know, how many people in general here that we're talking about. So Cynthia, I'll go back to start with you on this one.
Absolutely. So to be clear, I wish I could give you all of the data on the buying power of the Indigenous community in Northeast Ohio or even the state, but to be frank, that data does not exist. The invisibility of Native Americans in data collection and reporting is a very real issue, not just here in Ohio, but also nationally. I actually was asked by the Center for Community Solutions to write a blog about mental health and behavioral health issues for our community here in Cuyahoga County as part of the Dear Cuyahoga County Executive series they had. And my blog was about how I couldn't write that blog because there was no parsed out data for mental or behavioral health issues for Native Americans. This is a whole nother webinar about that issue, but I can point to some national data. So that's what I'm going to do. And I want to point out that we're about 2.7 million Native Americans in the United States. And that seems small, but just to put this in context too, about what power means, there are actually more Native Americans in the United States than Jewish people. So when people talk about, oh, you're just a small community, it's really about the narrative of power and what real investment will do for a community. That translates to about 3 to 4% of the population of the United States. We are a rapidly growing population compared to others. And one of the things I really want to point out is that 70% and upwards to 75 or 76% of Native Americans live off reservation. We are located in urban areas like Cleveland. From the 1950s to the 1970s, there was actually a federal policy by the United States government that bused Native Americans from reservations to 8 select cities across the United States, and Cleveland was one of those cities. And because of that, we actually have a pretty percentage-wise per capita number of Native Americans as compared to Detroit, where Michigan has 12 tribes in its state. Ohio has none. So it kind of shows you the impact of past federal policies and decisions. That particular policy was kind of a targeted assimilationist program. That's, again, a whole nother webinar. But there is a robust Native community here. There is a vibrant population as well in Columbus, Akron, Toledo. And it just really wanted to point off that most Native Americans do live off reservations and in urban areas like Cleveland.
Thank you. Very helpful. Dr. Rachel, let's go over to you.
I am just loving hearing from Cynthia because, of course, on both sides of my family, we, Blacks and Indians have been mixing together for many years, and so just hearing from Cynthia, I feel like I'm hearing my own story as well. So thank you so much, Cynthia. I really appreciate it. Black people, African American people make up 13.6% of our population. That number is actually staying pretty stagnant over the past 5 years. It's not, the browning of America is definitely happening. Black people are mixing with every race for sure, but that number is staying pretty solid, pretty stagnant for the past 5 years. In terms of our buying power, those numbers are pretty, they're utilized, at least over the past maybe 10 years, pretty rapidly because Black people have so much spending power and so much influence on the things that other people buy. So currently, Black people have about $1.8 trillion in spending power, at least by 2024. It'll be $1.8 trillion. I think this year it's about $1.3 trillion. And the influence, to Cynthia's earlier point, is not even measurable if you think about the influence on music, sports, technology, pretty much everything else. I'm a co-founding member of an organization called the BO Collective, which is Black women-owned businesses making over $1 million. So I thought it was important to talk about business owners. You've mentioned the fact that small business owners are watching us. Only less than 1% of the businesses that are in existence less than 2% of the businesses in existence make over $1 million. Women-owned businesses make over $1 million. 0.3% of those are Black women. The average revenue for a Black woman-owned business is about $25,000 per year. It's closer to $68,000 for our white counterparts. And so there is a tremendous, obviously, a tremendous gap. Barriers exist to success for Black women, which is one of the reasons that we came together and built the BOE Collective nationally in order to serve Black women in business, because we are the fastest growing small businesses, literally, of everyone, of any gender. So I thought that was important. Over 60% of the businesses that are started in America are women of color, right? So that would include all three of us, Black and Indigenous people of color. So we are the next marketplace, if you will, and investing in us and partnering up with us, I think, is extremely important.
Thank you. Sue, let's go over to you.
Yep. I did a little research, but I couldn't find the closest year's number. What I found is from 2000 to 2010, Asian American are the fastest growing racial group in Cleveland. In the 7-county area, that 42% growth rate from 2000 to 2010 in these 10 years. And there are 67,000 of Asian American in Cleveland, about 2% of population. In Cuyahoga County alone, about 3% of the population are Asian Americans. So the largest Asian American community in Cleveland are Indian, Chinese, Filipino, Korean, and Vietnamese, and Japanese. And these groups create an economic impact. I mean, in the economic world, there are, I would say, 2 generations. The old generation of Asian community more focused on restaurant, a supermarket, or small business like that in the food industry. Right now, the younger generation, because lots of them are international students, receive higher education in the US, and then immigrant by themselves as the first generation. So they have a higher income, but in the meantime, they have more saving. And the most common investment method they use is real estate. They like to buy in houses, and they don't like to loan money. They like to saving money. So I would say for Asian community, once they have money, they like to save it, and they want to invest in the real estate business. So that's the largest investment. So in my personal opinion, that I see lots of people doing that way. But at the same time, the younger generation, like 20, 30, that when they come here as international student or younger workforce, they like to just spend money to education, entertainment, and they like to buy lots of things. So you can see from different generations, they have different will of spending money, and that impact their power of spending too.
Yeah. I forgot to mention a couple of things really quick. The one thing I really wanted to point out with regards to some of these statistics is really to avoid focusing on the deficit narrative, which I think is a quick trap that people fall into with BIPOC communities, particularly the Indigenous community, because our poverty levels and wealth statistics are not very strong, right? But I do know that in 2011, the buying power was about 84 billion. That's nationally, and it has grown 67% since then to 2020 to about 140 billion. There's a great deal of investment. There is increases of educational attainment within the Native American communities. And if you look state by state where tribes are a little bit more focused, so for example, the state of Oklahoma, they generate about 15.6 billion for the state, and employ about 113, almost 114,000 individuals, both native and non-native, through the tribes there. That makes them one of the largest employers in the state. And I think that's something that people don't realize. And I think another thing to focus on too is that Native American tribes, we hold about 5% of the landmass of the United States under our jurisdiction. And so you think about just the number of people, the amount of resources and assets that come with that if you look at that 5%, that makes us the 4th largest state, if you put it all together in the United States. And so there is a lot of opportunity for investment. So when we talk about buying power, it's really easy to focus on kind of that deficit narrative. But really, if you look at what we have to offer the country, we've been here since its start. I think it's a really a great opportunity to invest better in those communities.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think the main point here is that this is a large percentage of the population with a lot of financial power in the United States. And so if you are a business owner, making sure that your business is one that is affirming, inclusive, a welcoming environment for folks that are part of all these different sectors of the BIPOC community is certainly one that will financially serve you well if you are able to capture kind of this market as your customer. Okay, great. So let's really quickly before I move on, I forgot to say this at the beginning, but please feel free if you do have questions for our panelists as we go along, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We've had a lot of folks during the series. If you'd like to ask anonymously, just go ahead and send a chat directly to myself as the host. I'm happy to ask on your behalf or drop it in the Q&A function in the Zoom if you have anything as we go along. We'll certainly have time for questions at the end, or if you have something that you wanted to expand upon as we're talking, please feel free to drop that in. All right, so with that, let's jump in here to kind of talking a little bit about the business community and small businesses here. So I'm curious to know, what do small businesses, whether it's the small business owner or folks who are working kind of in that small and medium-sized business environment, what do they need to know about conducting business with folks from this community, and what's important to them from a cultural perspective? So, just things that folks can be mindful of that are important culturally to this community that they should keep in mind if they're trying to think about doing business with folks from that community. So Sue, why don't we start with you on this one?
Yeah, actually that question I think about a lot. I want to say some tips for folks that wanted to do business in this community, but then I really feel it's nothing different. It's just to treat them as your normal client. You respect your client, and you just treat them as the same group as yourself, and that's how business grows. Of course, if you say I really want to promote my business in some specific community, I want to translate into the language that they use, that's a different story. But if that's not the purpose, it's just to treat them as your friend, as your family, as your normal customer. Yeah.
I will say I recently was in an Uber with a gentleman who was a Korean immigrant, and we got in the car, and he had his phone out to use the Google Translation app to kind of introduce himself and where are you headed today, whatever. And I hadn't had a reason more recently to use that technology, and it was amazing how far the technology has come with those translation services. I mean, it was able to pick up on humor. He was telling jokes, like it could pick up that context, and we were cracking up this whole time, in this car ride. And so I think things like that they boggle my mind of how you can do business and patronize business with somebody, even with who's an immigrant, and maybe there is a language barrier. The technology has come a very, very far way. So I thought that was
one thing that actually remind me, like for Chinese, we use something called WeChat. It's like a WhatsApp, but WeChat is more common for the whole Chinese people that are using. So in China is more functional, like you can pay bills, you can buy tickets, pay your social security, everything generated into that app. But in here, it's not, of course, we cannot pay social security to Chinese, but we like it has the Facebook function, like you share your daily thinking, share photos and videos. You can chat with your friends and create group. And actually, that is the most functional feature in this app, is that you can easily drag people into one group. So lots of business people using that in their daily life for working. For myself, I use that too. For example, if I have a client in China, I have someone in the US, I just drag them into a group and we start to talking. And everything, it also has reminder, it has a quote. So I can use it as an email function and as a task to-do list function all together. So if you really want to do business in Chinese specific community, make sure you have that know the WeChat. And for Cleveland, we have collaborated with some WeChat newsletter creators that all the chambers events are translated into Chinese and promoted by those newsletter promoters that they send newsletter every week in Chinese. So the Chinese communities who follow that newsletter will receive emails or receive notifications about the 10 things that happen in Cleveland every week, and they can see our event. So, and sometimes we help business to promote their information on that platform. So really, if you want to develop to connection to different community, know what they use for daily life. WeChat is definitely a daily app that we use in China and for Chinese community here. Yeah.
Wow, sounds like you can manage your whole life in one app. That's
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Dr. Rachel, let's go over to you.
Yeah, I've just been listening to this, and I feel like one sort of piece of this conversation around doing business with communities. We've been in business for 20 years. November 25th will be 20 years old, and some of our business has been marketing to communities. Black, Latinx, Asian communities, et cetera. And part of it is really understanding, at least from my perspective, the influencers as well, not just the buyers, but the people who influence those buyers. I feel like that, we really do need to kind of call those out because they are really important. From a data perspective, Black consumers tend to be younger, more plugged in to Sue's point, to technology than any other race. That's at least what the quantitative data tells us. The median age of the Black purchaser is 34 years old, which is a decade younger than white, their white counterparts. Black consumers are, again, highly digital. So we don't have we don't have an Apple like that. So it's pretty much TikTok and Instagram from that perspective. But we are more likely to own smartphones, and we use smartphones 12% more frequently than our white counterparts. We are nearly 3 times more likely than white Americans to align with values and companies that share our values. So interestingly, of course, we know we had an election, or at least we're still having an election right now. And the Gen Zers that came out really had an impact, a quantitative impact on that election. I'm very interested to see just sort of how this younger group of BIPOC people, influence not only elections, but purchasing moving forward.
Thank you. I also like to mention I met a woman last night who calls it the tick tick, and I've decided that's much better than TikTok, and I'm gonna call it that now. Cynthia, let's go over to you.
Yeah, so I think and I touched on this a little bit earlier, I think the main takeaway can bring to this conversation, in addition to what everyone else is saying here, definitely we are tapped into the social media aspect. I think TikTok in particular has really elevated a lot of cultural voices, native voices that I don't think we have had before, particularly with the younger generation, millennials and Gen Z. So definitely make sure that you're liking and following Indigenous thought leaders, influencers, if you will. There's a lot of Native organizations that you should be following in your social. And I feel like you would learn a lot more just digesting our news the same way you would digest your news. I think the other thing is to really respect tribal sovereignty. a lot of people don't understand or realize that we are those 574 separate sovereign nations. So really make sure that you're paying attention to the fact that we are, while there may be like a kind of a pan-native identity or cultural identity, there is very, very diverse aspects to that because we are different tribes. And on that identity, it's important to make sure that if you have a Native employee, people that you're serving in your community that are Native, there are different, like it's kind of on a spectrum. There are different people that really firmly identify with that identity and those who may not as much. And so make sure that you're not expecting everyone to be an expert in all things Native just because they identify as that. And the last thing, and this is the way that actually I get engaged the most the organizations that I work with, it's land acknowledgements. They are amazing tools for non-Native organizations and businesses to use to kind of start a truth and reconciliation process with themselves about what land they're standing on. You are on Native land. This is Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Erie, Shawnee land in Northeast Ohio. And it is an amazing tool for people to use to kind of stop, do the work, do the research, reflect, and kind of show what they've learned with the people that they work with and their clients. The one thing I will say though is I probably get about 4 to 5 requests in my inbox to help with land acknowledgements. That is not my work to do. The way they originally started was to do this truth and reconciliation process. I can't do that process for you. I can't help you understand your role in Northeast Ohio with regards to this land. That is your journey to take. And also don't, just reach out to organizations that are Native led during Native Heritage Month. We actually are in Native Heritage Month right now. And I call it like Rent a Native Month because I will hear from people for the very first time and often the only time during this month. And that type of performative, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later, it's really tough to swallow. And I will prioritize organizations that engage my community year round over those who only reach out during October and November.
Thank you. All right. So let's move into some sort of tips for folks who might be have some, I guess we'll say, concerns about certain aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what would you say to a business who's worried that their inclusivity initiatives may be seen as political in nature, alienate customers, or potentially cause them to lose sales by taking a stance? So Dr. Rachel, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah, because I do, our business is global. My customers are Amazon, Mars, Toyota, Pinterest, Rag and Bone. So we work with global organizations on their diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives. And so I work with people, a lot of whom look like me and a lot of whom do not, a lot of whom share my values and a lot of whom do not. And so organizations that hire us to help them build strategies, to help them build tactical approaches to engaging across 36 dimensions of diversity, really, want to know kind of not only what is the business case, but what is the social case for this, because there are people who are just sort of against it. And I always go back to your mission, your vision, and your values as an organization. Who are you? Right? Organizations are systems, just like individuals have systems, right? What do you believe as an organization? Who are you as an organization? If it's not clearly stated that inclusion is part of your mission, vision, and values, perhaps you should either rethink your mission, vision, and values, certainly not hire me, because that's what I'm there to do, is to help you with that. The business case is clear. I mean, at the end of the day, companies that promote diverse and inclusive, equitable practices across the spectrum of their employee life cycle and customer life cycle outperform their competitors by up to 36%, 2.5 times the amount of cash flow as those who do not. So again, the business case is clear. I have so much data on the financial returns of an organization that conducts itself as an inclusive, equitable, diverse, and culture that promotes belonging organization. However, it really does go back to your mission, vision, and values. And I want to just make one more point that this has brought up for me, and that is the toxic rock star. So I'm a recovered banker. I was headed for the C-suite in marketing before I got my PhD, before I began to study management and in specific trust. And so as an executive in the banking world, I saw so many people, individuals who would bring in revenue and create literally toxic environments for people. And they were allowed to stay. So it's not just what you say your culture is, it's what does your culture allow? What does your culture permit? What does your culture pay for? Right? So toxic rock stars can also be a horrible thing for your organization. Don't just say it in your mission and vision and values, but really make sure that you are creating a psychologically safe environment for every employee, no matter who they are, what they look like.
Thank you. Cynthia, let's go over to you on this one.
Dr. Rachel nailed it. Yes.
All
All that.
mic drop and move on that one. Sue, did you have anything else, or should we leave it at Dr. Rachel's words on that one?
No, that is perfect.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about talent attraction. So we know that obviously talent continues to be an issue with regard to the workforce right now. So let's talk a little bit about folks who are looking to diversify their talent pool and want to attract and of course retain employees who are part of different diverse groups, can bring different perspectives to the table, et cetera. What is important to those kind of in the BIPOC community with regard to their working environment? What are things that employers should be thinking about with that regard? And then if you also could touch on sort of what are some ways that businesses can proactively recruit a more racially diverse set of candidates? So how can they sort of put their business where those folks are, as opposed to throwing things out into the atmosphere and hoping that they magically find you? So Sue, why don't we start with you on this one?
Yeah, I think I'm on point on that because I'm a business immigration attorney. That we help lots of business to hire international talent. Of course, I won't be able to talk too much of the native Asian American who are born in U.S. and receive education here. My clients are more first generation immigrants that they come to the U.S. to explore their dream here. So first thing I really want the employer to keep in mind is that immigration is very complicated, but if you have a good attorney that they can navigate you through the process. It is not horrible or you think that too complicated, I cannot bear it, and so I won't hire any international people. So I want to say is a plan in advance so you know how this process will be, because the immigration application right now takes a long time, longer than before. So it will take time for them to be able to onboard. But once you give enough time for them, and they will really appreciate that they have a understandable employer help them and trying to navigate the process with them together, they will very loyalty to the company. And because of their immigration status, they don't want to change. So that will create another complexity for their ability to stay in the US. They want to stay with your business forever, or they want to stay as long as possible to be able to stay in this immigration status. So you know that your employee is very stay with the company. So once you do the procedure with them, you will create a very good labor force for the international immigrants. And then the other thing is, if you decide to fire any person, be mindful that their immigration status may be impacted by your decision. So try to give them some notice in advance, because like if they are H-1B worker visa holders, once you say you have to fire them, they have to, wrap up everything and sell the house, sell everything that they have in the US and move out of the US. So thinking about that time frame and the stress, if they have family members also in the US, thinking about that stress to this family, to give them enough time or help them find the next place that they can go. So try to close the gap so they don't be panic. Yeah.
I think about that as you look at, we help with job boards and helping source talent. And I look through different people's job applications and you see those questions, will you require, worker visa status, et cetera, yes or no? And I think about how many small businesses, if people are answering yes on that, they're like, I don't really know how to navigate this. I don't, so they're just probably disregarding candidates because they feel like, I don't really know what to do here with this person. And they are perhaps probably missing out on some really great, like you mentioned, very committed, very loyal, potential employees with that. And so I think that's really helpful that you bring that up, Sue. And certainly working with an immigration attorney to understand what goes into employing, folks who are immigrants who are not U.S. citizens, et cetera, and working with somebody like yourself is certainly advisable for any small business, just so they know kind of how that procedure works.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Cynthia, let's go over to you.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I think that, for talent and retention that is important for our community. And I don't know if anyone has looked at, I think the United Way of Greater Cleveland has come out with a recent report on the social determinants of work. We also did a City Club forum on the social determinants of work. I think a lot of us have heard of the social determinants of health. These are things that are not actually health, but impact a person's health. We have the same thing for work. It's things that like make it tough for a person to either get or stay on the job, retain a job that they like. And addressing those social determinants of work, I think would go 1,000 miles in making a job very welcoming, because again, our community is predominantly low income, right? So a lot of the issues that you see impacting those in low income communities, marginalized communities, communities that are underinvested in, we see that reflected in our community as well. So addressing those social determinants of work, I think would go a long way in making sure that you're able to attract and retain Indigenous employees. I think the other thing too is having a very flexible PTO. I cannot stress this enough. Native ceremonies do not align typically with traditional like Catholic, Christian, Jewish, other like times that, people typically get off on their calendar. I have for my husband's tribe, and he's Haudenosaunee on his reservations in Ontario, and his ceremonies are week long in Longhouse. So having that flexible PTO for your employees to be able to take the time off to get back to their Longhouse or to their ceremony back home, I think goes, especially in a state like Ohio where it takes a minute to get back to where you need to go for ceremony. So I think that goes an incredible long way. And the last and kind of more straightforward thing, does your business have stereotypical Native imagery in its logo, in its design? Do you sell products that have Native imagery that appropriate Native culture? That is a first single-handed way to raise a red flag to someone in our community that is not going to be a welcoming or comfortable place for us to work. Am I supposed to talk about too how to recruit, or are we getting to that later?
Right now, if you have any tips
Awesome.
for kind of how to practice recruit, yeah.
So there are a lot of national Native organizations that have national conferences multiple times a year that I 10 out of 10 recommend you get on your calendar. The American Indian Science and Engineering Society is one of the top national Native organizations that produce Native Americans. Instead, my husband received his position out of the NASA Glenn Research Center in aerospace engineering from this. My sister was employed at Northrop Grumman from this organization. They literally have a whole hiring fair at their national organization. The National Center for American Indian Enterprise and Development is another amazing economic development national organization that does a great deal of work in this. Just really Google national Native organizations, find out when their conferences are. There are going to be so many brilliant and bright, driven Native folks that you can connect with there, and also just getting part of that network. I think, one of the things we know is it's who knows who knows who. You'll start getting into that network and you'll be able to tap into it very quickly.
Great, thank you. I tried to drop the link there as you were talking in the chat for ACES, Advancing Indigenous People in STEM, I think is what you're referencing. Yeah. And can you tell me again the second one you were mentioning, Cynthia, the other organization?
It's the National Center for American Indian Enterprise and Development. There's the National Indian Education Association. There are so many. There's hundreds, but those are some of the top ones, especially if your organization or your small business is in tech, any type of science, manufacturing, business. ACES is really a go-to organization for that type of recruitment.
Great, thank you for that. I'm going to share some resources out with folks after the event today. I want to make sure I included those. All right, Dr. Rachel, let's go over to you.
Well, a lot has already been said. I think just looking at this from a Black perspective, there are a number of HBCUs, as you know, like that's kind of the go-to place for recruiting Black individuals. We have everything from the Black Lawyers Association to Black scientists to Black engineers, Black accountants, et cetera. There are, endless recruiting and sourcing spaces. But quite frankly, I'm going to add something that I think is extremely important, and that is, Cynthia talked about making sure you don't have, racist, horrible imagery, language, or environment and culture, right? You may not have any pictures on the wall, but people don't feel that they belong there. And so ensuring that people's contribution is valued, but also that their individuality is valued as a human being. I do want to speak to just quickly your employee value proposition, or EVP. What is that? Going back to these fundamentals, what's your mission? What's your vision? What are your values? Who do you want to be? How do you want to behave? And then what is your EVP? So when you are attracting individuals from an inclusive sourcing perspective, inclusive hiring, onboarding, the entire employee life cycle, you can tell them these are the reasons that you want to work here, and then make sure that these are not just statements, performative statements, but that they are true, right? So you want to make sure that you're paying everyone a decent, equitable wage. We're not there. We're nowhere near there yet, but that you're paying everyone a decent, equitable wage, right? You want to make sure that you are providing that time off. We're still redefining what it means to even work right now. We've experienced 3 pandemics together: health, the racial unrest, and the economic unrest. Those are 3 pandemics that we are still experiencing together. So as we redefine the meaning of work and how we engage one another, really understanding where each individual sits, where communities sit, and making sure that your values are aligned with those individuals. Because at the end of the day, when you're trying to attract people, we have about 15 employees, and we are just 7 of them are PhDs. We are struggling to find people, just like Amazon is, right? Just like our larger employee brothers and sisters are. And at the end of the day, you want to be the organization where people come to live out their aspirations, right? Everyone wants to go where they feel like they're living their aspirations out. So how can you both be that place and communicate that you are that place? And that's what an EVP does for you.
Great, thank you. I think that's actually a perfect segue into the next thing I wanted to cover here, Dr. Rachel, which is, and I know Cynthia, you talked a little bit about this earlier as well, sort of effective allyship to the community versus performative allyship. And so you mentioned, Cynthia, we're in, Indigenous Heritage Month right now, and as a member of the queer community, I know June 1st comes and all of a sudden everybody's knocking on the door because it's Pride Month, and then July 1st rolls around.
July 1st, yeah, it's like,
year.
Hey, where'd everybody go?
Yeah.
So I'm curious if we can talk a little bit about that. So not only from an individual perspective, obviously, but as a business, how can you be an effective ally and not just a performative one year round? So Cynthia, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so the perform it's very obvious when someone's performative and they only engage you during that 1 month of the year. And I think the most important thing you can do is look internally at who you're bringing to the table. So an example is through the land acknowledgement process. When I have mid to large size corporations and companies, organizations, institutions reach out to me to help with the land acknowledgement, that's a red flag to me because it immediately tells me that they do not have any type of structure or internal group to reach out to who is Indigenous. So they have no Native American folks that they know of within their institution that they can engage. That is where the focus needs to lie, not on, if you have no folks within your organization to turn to talk about a land acknowledgement, perhaps maybe that's where the focus should be, the energy should be focused, is increasing that representation within your own internal community. So I think that's the first thing is, look internally of how you're representing that group. And I think the second thing is making sure that, when you bring people to the table, like, how are you interacting with them? Where are you bringing them? Like, what kind of, influence, authority are you providing them? Or are they just being that token person, right? I cannot tell you how many times my existence within people's network has changed their perception of Native people. And I didn't take to the streets. I didn't bring out signs. I didn't have people sign petitions. Just me being there has changed people's perceptions. And that's because I'm now at tables that I had not been at before, right? And so when you are bringing these individuals into your organization, or you're engaging with these groups, in communities, what tables are you bringing them to? Or are you gatekeeping and not letting them get to, directly to the folks that they should be talking to?
Thank you. I'm going to drop this in the chat too, Cynthia. This is one I've seen that I like through CASE. Just a quick example of what you're talking about. It can be a simple statement, and also they do have some resource for this at the Social Justice Institute here at CASE with regard to land acknowledgement. So just throw that in an example. If it's not a great one, please let me know. But I had seen that reference before, and I figured I would just drop it in the chat.
Yeah, the main thing about land acknowledgements too is if you do write them, make sure they are not 100% in the past tense. I have been in audiences where land acknowledgements were given, and I'm so glad that they did the work. And again, it's important that you undertake this journey to write one on your own. But if it's completely in the past tense and you have Indigenous people in your audience, that is awkward. Like, we are still here and very much so alive. So make sure you recognize and acknowledge the current modern Native people as well.
Thank you. Very helpful. Dr. Rachel, let's go over to you.
I actually have a story that I think is critical here around, because I do this work every single day, literally every day, and I literally test clients. If you're going to be performative, then don't hire me. I don't want the work. I don't have the time, and it's not worth the emotional toll on my spirit. Okay. If you're not serious about doing inclusion, not that you're going to do it right. There is no ultimate right way to do things but there is a spirit with which you can do it, where you're continuing to learn and bring everyone along with you. So I mentioned that Amazon is a client. We have about 8 programs and projects with them across the institution. And one of them started with an idea around elevating and celebrating Black women. Amazon has been in business for 25 years. They employ 1.7 million people. They're the largest employer on earth. And they have never at this time, which was last year, elevated and celebrated their Black women employees. And so we worked together for 11 months to put together this program called Shine. And so we were celebrating Black women who were leaders, L7 and above, and that's sort of director level and above. 357 Black women from across the world came to to Seattle. We were going to do it someplace else so that we could be at a Black-owned hotel, et cetera. But we said, Amazon is in Seattle. We are literally going to invade Seattle with Black women for these 3 days. It was amazing. It was absolutely incredible. So that could have been a performative action. We had Usher sing and all of these fabulous people, individuals there to celebrate, to elevate and celebrate Black women. The part that I owned of this is the coaching, right? Executive coaching. And it started during the session and it is going on for 18 months. But we're not only coaching these women on how to show up at work, how to get promoted, how to Cynthia's point, get in rooms that you have never been in before, how to exert your power, how to speak up for yourself. All of these things that we're coaching these women on, but we are also coaching their leaders, their bosses, right? For the same 18 months, so that they don't go back into a culture. They left Shine like, I'm queen of the world. Amazon loves me. This is a place where I can live out my aspirations. As a matter of fact, 6 women came up to me and said, I was going to leave this company before this event. And now I feel like I'm going to give it an opportunity. I'm going to stay here. Obviously the best and the brightest. This could have been seen as very performative, but because of the 18 months that we are investing in these women and in their leaders. So now you have a group of Black women and a group largely of white men, right, who are their bosses, both going through the same inclusive leadership program or very similar program. That's where that's where the change can happen, right? So you can take something that looks performative and say, this is bullshit, this part. But if we go deeper, then we can really make an impact and change people's lives, give them the tools and resources in order to improve and get better, right? So I would say, again, there are organizations that call and I know they want to be performative, and I ask them those deeper questions, right? So we can take something that starts as perhaps performative and go deeper.
Thank you. What a great example. Sue, let's go over to you.
Yeah, Dr. Rachel's opinion really inspired me, and actually that was happened on me, because as the Chinese Chamber, during the AAPI months, we receive lots of panelists requests or invitations, and I know that they are performative. Mm-hmm. But what I wanted to do is, through that performative event, I asked them what the next step, what we can do to transform the performative into an effective thing. So actually I had that last year. And after that event, following up with them, I say, okay, because we mentioned this in our event, I really want to have some program from you. We collaborate together, and I can drag my collaborators together, and we make it as an action plan. So this year, we actually start a one event with them, and very informative, and they have a dedicated person on that. And after that event, everyone attend that event feel, wow, this is new to us. This is exciting, and we want to continue to do it. So we actually successfully transform that to a very effective action in the future. So I think people become performative. Maybe they don't understand how to do it for the next step. So you have some leaders or the community people to try to navigate them to the next. Yeah.
If I can also add really quick to something that I've learned, and this may be relevant too for maybe some of our smaller to mid-size businesses where, you likely won't have someone who's native because maybe you only have like 3 or 4 folks, in your employer. So I think the one thing that to point out too is Some studies have shown that 87% of schools in this country do not talk about Native Americans after the year 1900. We just completely disappear off of like school curriculum. 2/3 of this country have never met a Native person. So there's no proximity to our community. So you can't think of how much you've learned by just being proximate to someone, right? The food, the culture, the language, just the diversity and richness of that culture. It's harder to do for our community because we, 2/3 of this country have not met a Native person. 87% of the country have not been taught about us after the year 1900. I think it's a kind of a challenge to everyone to actively get to know and understand who we are as a modern people. And that's a very big ask, but I think it's necessary and it's possible. Again, I had mentioned following on social media, a lot of national Native organizations, thought leaders, academics, news organizations. There's so many podcasts out there now that you can just put on while you're on the treadmill. I really think it's important that people take active efforts to understand who we are as a modern people. And I think that will start opening up your kind of perspective about how to more naturally engage with our community just by getting to know who we are today.
Yeah, that is an absolutely perfect segue, Cynthia, into our next question here as we start to wrap things up. But I'd love to see if we could highlight if there are organizations or resources that folks could get involved with that might help them just better educate themselves on the community, get engaged and connected with people who are in the community. And if you could also just touch on a little bit with that, if somebody's not a member of that community, I think sometimes it can be intimidating to feel like you're inserting yourself into an environment that maybe wasn't designed for you as, not a member of that community. So how folks can maybe engage with those resources in a way that's meaningful and helpful and effective. So Cynthia, since you kind of were already on that train, I'm going to go ahead and turn it to you.
Yeah, so I can send over some of the Twitter handles of some folks that I personally follow in Native America that are amazing. Indian Country Today is one of the top news outlets that I think it's important to make sure pops up on your news feed. There's the National Native American News, Native American Calling. Some of these also focus on First Nations, but a lot of the same issues that we see in Canada, we're also seeing here in the United States. Some of my favorite podcasts are All My Relations. That's by Matika Wilbur and Dr. Adrienne Keene, who they're just two amazing Native women who kind of just dig deep into a lot of the more modern Native issues. And there's 2 TV shows, actually. We finally, in 2021, last year, got 2 TV shows that were written by and produced, directed by Native people. It took that long for us to get 2 TV shows. And I think the best part is they're both comedies. If there's anything I can say is like, of course, when we finally get our TV show, it's going to be a comedy because there's nothing more like amazing than Native joy. And again, like moving past that deficit narrative and just like really diving into like all the things that we find joy in. It's Reservation Dogs, which actually was nominated for a number of Emmys. It's really good. And Rutherford Falls. So there's a lot of books that are there by Tommy Orange. There's so many places where you can get started. And honestly, if I gave somebody a book or recommended something to like catch them up on everything that they weren't taught, that they missed, that they can't get by proximity, it's going to be like this thick and no one's going to read it. So really just take an effort to like do an audit of your social media feed, add Indigenous voices to that, and you will find that you're going to get more information, more news, and more points of view. And again, we're 574 tribes. You're going to get so many differing points of view, and I think that is the big takeaway here.
Great. Thank you. Sue, let's go over to you.
So I want to say in the local Cleveland area, Northeast Ohio, there's a couple organizations that really help Asian community to in multiple aspects, like our Chinese Chamber focus on business, and the Asian in Action Inc. They help to help local people getting healthcare resource, the language support, and some business supporting. But they are more focused on community social work type of thing. And the Midtown, they have an Asian Town team that work with Asian Town area between East 30 to East 40, that Asian Town area, and they help lots of small business over there. to reach out to other business communities. And Asian Festival, that's a multi-organization collaboration in Cleveland. We try to promote Asian community in that event too. You know, Chinese New Year is the largest celebration, not only in China, but also in Asian country. So every year, actually the Chinese New Year's date are not stable. People think, well, why there's no like a February 1st every year for celebration? That because Chinese New Year using lunar calendar. So every year the lunar calendar first day are changing. Keep that in mind so that when you see, oh, there's a Chinese New Year celebration early every year, the date may be changed. So next year will be January 22nd. There will be multiple organizations trying to celebrate that, and our Chinese Chamber will do that as well in the Art Museum. So, and also, if you are interested in know more about China, of course, there are lots of media report Chinese political things or business things. What I want people to think is not only if you found that all the newspaper you read are talking that China is bad, we're thinking of that because nothing is black on yes or no or good and bad. There's always something behind that. So if you want to keep neutral, keep midpoint and thinking in different way. Don't hate specific race. We are all people that living in the same world. We are all hardworking people trying to give good life to our family. Just thinking that way, people will be feel peaceful and more understandable to each other.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Rachel, let's close it up with you.
Well, thank you. I just want to thank you to Cynthia and Sue. Both of you are amazing, and we really should get together and do lunch. To your point about about proximity, we really should. So I have a number of resources. I actually have a book list that I share with my clients. So I'm going to call out a few resources that you can share with your audience, and I will also send you this book list. I also want to share that there are a number of we've kind of touched on it just a very, very little bit, and that is our mental health. Cynthia talked about it just briefly. Our collective mental health is in the balance right now because of the 3 pandemics that I've discussed. We really, really need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and taking care of each other as humans, as human beings. So really, I would suggest you look each other in the eye and find out how people are doing and care about the answer that they give you. So that's just something that I would say and share with you. There are a number of Black, probably Indigenous, probably Chinese and Asian therapists as well. They're not on my list, but I just want to call them out. So just a couple of articles. I love 1619. You know, a lot of people have an issue with it. I don't. I think it is spot on. The Intersectionality Wars by Jane Coaston is great. Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I am a huge Ibram Kendi fan as well. You know, How to Be an Anti-Racist is great. Cast by Isabella Wilkerson is great. Locking Up Our Own: Crime and Punishment in Black America by James Foreman Jr. is amazing. Racism Without Racists by Eduardo Bonilla Silva is amazing as well. And Raising White Kids, Bringing Up Children in a Racially Unjust America by Jennifer Harvey are just a few of the books. There's a podcast around 1619, which is great. There's a podcast called Code Switch, which is also pretty amazing, and another one called Seeing White. And then there's this website again, and I'll send this to you, 75 things white people can do for racial justice. At the end of the day, we as a diverse, inclusive, equitable culture that creates a sense of belonging, if we are truly all of those things, then all of us have a responsibility to be those things. And so I just want to make sure that we don't leave our white brothers and sisters out of this conversation, because they should be part of it as well. So, you know, that's pretty much all I have to offer. This has really been a blessing, and it has been so wonderful. Thank you, Megan, for the invitation. Thank you, Cynthia, for all of your insights. Again, I feel like I'm living my own history listening to you based on the 5 races that I have. And Sue, thank you so very much for the work that you do, making sure that our immigration system is fair for every single human being. Thank you.
Thanks.
And I want to remind everyone that I have lunch at City Club every week, every Friday. So you're welcome to join us for lunch and hear some amazing speakers here at the City Club.
You know, I've been a member of the City Club for, I don't even know how many years. And then I moved out to Akron, and I just don't come anymore. So I'm going to make it a date, and we'll reach out to you when I'm coming.
All right.
Oh, John, my firm is very close to City Club. I would love to join, guys.
All right. Well, ladies, thank you all so much for bringing a unique perspective to this conversation, for all of the resources. Dr. Rachel, I was typing as fast as I could, but I'll look out for the list that
I'll
you're going
send it to you.
And with Sue and Cynthia, I have about 400 tabs open on my internet browser right now. So many amazing resources shared, all of your insight. We're recording today, of course, so we'll be sharing that out with folks. But thank you all to our panelists for joining us. Thanks to those who are live streaming and those who are on watching. And we appreciate you being here. Thanks to BW and to Cuyahoga Community College for sponsoring the event, so we can make this available to everybody. And with that, we will sign off and say thank y'all and have a good rest of your week. And panelists, thanks again. We appreciate you very much.
Thank you so much. And I'm on the board of the Cuyahoga Community Foundation. So thank you very, very much to Tri-C and Bob Wallace.
Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.